since we have a large representation from the financial services industry, particularly banking, was about regulation and whether regulation could lead to complacency. And I think there was another point that was also mentioned is, how do you see competition, and particularly with what's happening today, because we see non-banks getting into the banking space. We see new niche banks being announced by the Reserve Bank, the payment banks, and the small finance banks. And it was very interesting that, when this announcement came up of the payment banks, there were two different reactions from CEOs of large banks. And both recognized that payment banks could potentially be a challenge, at least in some aspects of the business. But one's reaction was, oh, they are going to come with agile methods and agile delivery models and so on and so forth. And no solution in that sense. It was a little bit of an awe. And another who said, well, there will always be challenges and we've got to be agile to succeed. So I thought that was a good kind of context, because a lot of what we do as a technology company is our ability to bring more agility into organizations that we work with, right? In order to be able to be more responsive to what's happening in the business environment. So to continue from where Sudhakar left, talking of these two organizations within an organization, one being the conventional organization, which operated with the traditional systems, and then, the emergence of this new digital world, and a very different set of systems that need to come in. The need to be, on the one side, very responsive, on the other side, to maintain the integrity of the organization, its business, its data, its customer information, and so on and so forth. And what we are seeing is that every organization starts by doing a few things digital, which is very different from becoming a digital organization. So we see that, in the initial stages, that there might be small steps to use, say, social media, or to bring in some analytics or build some apps. But at some point in time, the organization, depending on the speed at which it operates, is likely to reach an inflection point where the transformation is getting inhibited by the slowness of the systems that it needs to kind of work with. Or the other side is that, the systems can just proliferate and create a whole set of issues related to data integrity and customer service and so on and so forth. And that's the time when an organization feels the need to kind of step back and see what it do. And some organizations will come out very successful, and some organizations will begin to get dragged. And our point today at Mastek is to say that, look ahead. If you have not reached the inflection point, you're probably getting there somewhere. And if you're not seeing that on the horizon, you're probably not doing enough on the digital front. So that is an important point. And if you're going to be there, going ahead and embracing digital technology to be a digital organization, as against an organization that does a few things digitally, then you will need to be able to set up an organization, and not just an IT organization, but an organization, an enterprise that works on two speeds. One which works at the speed of the customer, so to say, and the one which is working at the speed of the organization. The customer is pulling you much faster than the organization can move, and how do you kind of balance those two? So we've seen, we had a look at some best cases, and we said, let's look at what do some of the leaders in this space talk about. And the CEO of Societe Generale says that, digital transition is not an overnight thing, right? But business has to lead from the front line. And when they took the decision to move digital, they clearly outlined three streams of, or three areas of key focus. One was to improve the customer experience. The second, change the way employees collaborate. Gagan, you talked about that. How do we, provide make employees more digitally enabled by providing them the tools and technologies that they need. So change the way employees collaborate and investing in the right systems, which means laying the right foundation for the organization to go digital at the speed that is desirable. So we've seen a few other cases. Again, Lloyd's Bank, a very old bank, a very traditional bank, which took a decision that said that we have to rethink our foundation. We're not saying to discard the foundation of what you have, but you need to rethink and see how that foundation can be strengthened, can be energized in order to support the digital initiatives. Even organizations that started digital, and Amazon is a good case, that after some time, they found that it was not manageable. It came to a point where they had to set certain standards in place, they had to set certain guidelines in place, to the point that Jeff Bezos actually had to send out a mail saying anybody who doesn't comply will be fired. But having done that, they were able to build a foundation which let them change the organization completely, because they were always dealing with physical products before that, and they could get into the digital business of, from selling videotapes to selling streaming video, and offering and selling computers to providing IT services on demand or infrastructure services on demand. That was the level of transformation that they could bring in by rethinking what they had at the core. So when we look at that, we try to look at what our perspective would be and what is our point of view when it comes to what organizations need to do from a technology perspective. There are the leadership issues and there are the integration issues and so on and so forth. But how does one prepare and create or lay a foundation for the organization to go digital? And there is what we felt is the need to be able to clearly architect your systems in such a way that you can clearly pinpoint and say that, these are systems that I don't need to touch very often, and I can have one method of dealing with these systems, and these are systems that need to evolve very rapidly, and therefore I need to kind of decouple these two systems and allow them to operate at different speeds, and yet have the synchronization that is necessary for both of them to be seen as one entity or one organization as a whole. So essentially, you're going to have an organization which is operating at two speeds. Your IT infrastructure, your IT services essentially also need to operate at two speeds. So, and you spoke about the omni-channel, and we are saying that how can you have the omni-channel unless you get away from these monolith front ends and kind of make the front ends just a matter of presentation and take away all the nuances of the processing into units which are sitting behind the front end, which can service all the channels. So whether you go to a branch teller or you operate at an ATM or you're on mobile banking or internet banking or even the internet portal or the call center, all of these should be able to derive information from certain repositories which are servicing them. So what we've outlined over here is that instead of kind of looking at all systems which do everything, how can you kind of decouple them and have separate engines running different aspects of the processing needs of the organization. So some just do transaction management, some only do analytics, some only do process orchestration, some only do customer interaction, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of architecture that we see. Now, how does that pan out in every organization is something that is very individual. That's the skill of the architect who kind of takes a look at how the organization functions, what its infrastructure or data resources are, and how these can be decoupled and how these can be kind of insulated from each other so that one can operate at a very rapid pace without causing great amount of pain to the organization, because otherwise it can lead to significant pain. So we looked at a couple of scenarios and we said, how does this kind of pan out? So we looked at one case where we said that there is a customer who's operating on a mobile phone, and the customer does a simple activity like a balance inquiry. So the balance inquiry goes to an activity server, gets processed by the transaction engine, and there is the enterprise data center from which the customer needs to interact with. But while the customer is doing that, the customer is also passing on information about his location, his or her location. So now, although the customer made a simple balance inquiry, you also know that the customer is located somewhere, and that information is passed on to an analytics engine which recognizes that actually the customer is operating from a different city in a different country, and perhaps there is at that point in time, the discovery that if the customer is sitting overseas, then perhaps there is a need for forex. When that need has been established, how can you go then to the customer relationship engine and find out what is that relationship that we have today with the customer, and therefore what is the special rate I can offer this customer, because this customer is abroad, he is not transacted with us for foreign exchange, and maybe that's a need. Right? So we pick up the forex rates, the product engine will pick up the forex rates and then pass that on. And this is the orchestration that we would eventually see. And therefore, finally, the customer interaction engine would push out a special offer in the app to the customer and try to engage at that point in time. What we are saying here is, the user experience that we talked about is now becoming very relevant because you are trying to enrich that experience by bringing in value add, right? You're saying that, hey, you are overseas, you need foreign exchange, we have a great relationship with you, how can I give you a better deal for your foreign exchange needs? So this is just one example where we felt how, the orchestration can work out. How can we make our, the experience of the customer more enriching by making it relevant? I think the most important aspect of engaging and enriching the experience is making it relevant at that point in time when the customer is seeking to interact, or that you have found a reason to interact with the customer. So that is essentially where we want to get to. Taking a look at a non-customer, we are saying that the customer could perhaps come to you from an internet portal, right? And the customer interaction engine, gets that information. You also get to know the location and the device information. But you also got the customer excited about using some assets that you have created on your portal. In this case, since the customer had inquired about a loan, you offer him an EMI calculator. And in the process of giving him the EMI calculator, you pick up some information about the customer's identity and then use that identity information to process it and send it back with again, an offer to the customer that if you perhaps take a loan from us, this is what we could potentially offer you. So we try to look at two different scenarios of how to make this experience more engaging for an active customer or somebody who could potentially be a customer who has visited your website. So essentially, what is our objective as an IT services company? In the context of financial services, we think that there is potential to make product management more dynamic, to make pricing more dynamic. We think these are opportunity areas. How do we tap into that? We are saying that the omni-channel, in terms of how do I engage across channels and yet be very consistent in the service that I provide to the customer is again an opportunity, and we think that we can work with potential customers to deliver that. Customer engagement has typically been, when we could go to the bank or we could engage with somebody, intelligent on the other side. We are saying that applications can be made more intelligent because we have enough information and we have the ability to write the right behavioral algorithms in order to be able to make that experience a little more enriching. We talked of, moments of truth, or there could be life events. From social media, you could have figured out a person who is interested in buying a house, which is a life event. So you could make the experience a lot better around, simple transactional moments of truth around life events. There is potential to use it for proactive fraud detection and having an overall trend understanding. So your product management, etc., can really respond to broader trends that are happening. How can Mastek, kind of engage? Yeah, we have these whole lot of services. We are an application services company. We have great software engineers and so on and so forth. But in the digital world, it's slightly different. It's not like getting a requirement, you write a spec, you get an approval, and then you go ahead and deliver a piece of code after 6 months or 7 months. We think the engagement model completely changes. So we are saying that, okay, if you want to use real-time analytics, maybe we could set up a real-time analytics hub for you. Or we are saying that, if you want to work around the visual experience of your applications, we could bring in, good designers and set up a design studio that is relevant or that can work with your team in order to improve the experience of the customer. Or we are saying that we could actually set up to have a longer term relationship and set up an innovation lab where our teams work in a very close relationship with the customer, and then work through this innovation lab to bring out new products and services a lot faster. And we are also creating an infrastructure to do hackathons for clients. So we are saying that if even if you want to bring your own team and run a hackathon over 2 days at a Mastek facility, we would be able to create that kind of an environment for you whereby you can bring your own team and run a hackathon, and we would provide you all the services and support that you need to run a hackathon. So these are some of the things that we can bring to the table in order to make the organization more creative, or to to kind of enrich the whole experience through creativity. On the other side, the other pillar we said is the need to be responsive, and we are saying that yes, we could involve in something which is very complex, which is in terms of how to transition to a two-speed architecture from where you are currently. We have accelerators. We also, Sudhakar spoke of Mastek being an agile organization, that we've gone through that transformation. Also very recently, we've acquired a company in the UK called Indigo Blue, which does nothing but agile consulting, right? So we have great amount of expertise in that area to bring about organizational transformation, besides using agile in the projects and in the work and in the work that we would do for you. And the other very important aspect is, in terms of enabling DevOps, where we've gone from the traditional method of software going through the typical cycle of development, test, production. We are saying it's very hard to kind of separate dev, test, and production in the digital world. And how can we kind of bring them all together and put teams which bring in business, IT operations, and software development all together, so that we could run a continuous production environment rather than going through a very classical dev test production kind of a system in bringing out and launching new applications. In terms of being adaptive, the cloud is an important area. How can we architect the environment to be more adaptive, and particularly from two aspects. One is, this whole idea of two-speed, but the other thing that you have in digital organizations is this huge spurts that you suddenly have. $1 billion day and all that kind of stuff, suddenly Diwali or New Year's, and these sudden bursts. You can't really, plan your infrastructure to be so expensive that you plan for those kind of peaks which are completely out of sync with what you need on a day-to-day basis. And how do you kind of have the most optimal method of kind of dealing with these kind of requirements? The other aspect is, in terms of being able to integrate what's available outside the enterprise, different data types, high speed, quality of data questionable. How do you kind of bring that and make sense of it in the enterprise environment? And finally, choosing the right set of tools, whether it's IT operations or it's development or specific functional areas like marketing, etc. How do we bring in the right set of tools in order to be able to put the solution together? So this, in a nutshell, is the way we would like to go forward and kind of engage, with clients who have embarked on the digital journey, so to say, because we think it's a journey. And you are everywhere at some stage, or you have taken some steps, or have moved a few stations on that journey. But there is a lot more to come, and depending on where you are, what you want to do, the right service could be called for, or we could put together the right service in order to make that experience a little less painful. So this is broadly a set of customers that we have worked with, both in terms of providing agile consulting, which is one strong area and need from in terms of going digital, and then various organizations for which we have done all kinds of development work, both in India and abroad. These are some of the awards that we have won. So basically that's the little message that I wanted to leave you with, because yes, we all want to go digital, but how can Mastek help you? And I hope I've been able to give you some perspective of what our point of view is in terms of what it takes to go digital, fully digital. I don't mean incrementally digital, but to transform into a digital organization, and what are the services and how can we potentially engage on that journey.